Hey everyone, welcome back to LifePoint Students Online. We are in week 2 of James in 5. That's 5 weeks of James and we're in week 2. Just a quick reminder, Sunday nights, we're here at 6:30 to 8 for our in-person gathering for student ministry. And we've pushed it back to 8 and we're trying to find a time and a place to push it back to our full 8:30 time frame. Pre-pandemic time frame. Hopefully we'll get there soon. Trying to make this as step-by-step as possible. So thank you for bearing with us. And as things seem to improve, which praise the Lord, it looks like that, then obviously we'll be taking other steps to add more and more things back to our schedule. But with that said, we are still trying to add things in there. We're still trying to find a good time, a good situation where we're trying to do some missional things, to work with some local ministries and get them up and running, do some maintenance style kind of mission trip. So be on the lookout for that information. Also, trying to add our kind of Laser Dome trip. If you're familiar with Laser Dome, we're trying to get back to that. That's a classic thing that I'm sure many of you would enjoy. I know I would. The point is also, lest I also forget, that there's also Creation Festival. Still have tickets, and kind of a slight change to that. Of course, we want any youth to go that is willing and able. But seeing as how this year is a little different, we're thinking about maybe opening that up to kind of the wider church, maybe folks with teens and kids, or just kids. Again, we're kind of trying to see what that would look like. If you're interested, if you're one of those folks who are in that situation, contact me and we'll see what we can arrange. We'll kind of make the pricing as easy as possible, I guess would be the way to put it. But again, if that's an interest that you have, please look me up and try or pick me out on a Sunday and let's have a discussion. With that, that's kind of two birds with one stone. I mentioned creation and Sunday nights. Hey, great job. So we are in week 2, like I said, and the title of this message is Just Do It. This is no copyright infringement, by the way. James is encouraging us to do what Christians ought to do. So no problem there. James, we're looking at James chapter 2, and we're zeroing in on verses 14 through 19, though. I would encourage you to read the whole chapter, read the whole book, read the whole Bible, all that. But we're kind of taking a lot of lesson today from those verses. So as a quick recap, last week we began to read through the book of James. And if you read through that whole chapter, which I know many of you did, James, you might get the impression he's all about just the rules of being a Christian. And, I think in some ways you could probably say that is somewhat true. He is writing to people who are already followers of Jesus, and he wants them to know how they're supposed to act and think and live. His audience, us today as well. But remember who his audience is. These were Jews who have accepted Christ, and as a result were persecuted within their communities and left or stayed to be persecuted. I'm sure there's a lot of that too. But many of them left, and James is writing to them to encourage them, to challenge them, and to kind of address really the same stuff that Paul addresses, at least in some respects, when Paul is writing to Gentiles in Rome or Roman cities. And the message is kind of similar in that, hey, you need to stop doing this and you need to kind of do more of that. So in that respect, we might get the impression that these are rules. But it's kind of a consistent message across the board between Paul, James, John, Peter, and we see a lot of that as we go through the New Testament. So why is James doing this especially? Because he wants them to become more like Jesus. And everything that James is saying describes what Jesus is actually like. So while it might feel like rules, or it might sound like rules, that's how Jesus lived. That was Jesus' existence, not rules. That's just who he was. And the closest that James and the other writers can try and get us, the closest they can get us is to help us to see if we do more of this, we'll be more like Jesus. If we stop doing that kind of stuff, we'll be more like Jesus. So to kind of set up these things of, hey, this will get you more successful to be like Jesus. Not doing this will also help you be successful. So it might feel like do's and don'ts, but in reality, it's all an attempt to try and get us on the path of following or living more like Jesus. So now I think it should be said that James and many of the other New Testament writers didn't set out, again, their goal wasn't to try and make a list of do's and don'ts. In fact, they would argue, and I would agree with them, that that's our perception. Bang, bang on the mic. That's our perception. That's something that we, in our modern minds and our sophisticated society, have conjured up. When in reality, it couldn't be any different. The goal of James and the others is to shed a real light on the things we need to avoid in our day-to-day life. And if we want to continue it, which we say we wanted to get on the journey of trying to be more like Jesus when we came to Christ, if we want to continue our journey to be as much like Jesus as possible, then let's listen to us if you want to continue that journey, is kind of more of what their goal was. What some might criticize as do's and don'ts, and believe me, that's a huge criticism of Christian faith and reading the Bible of many modern people today. It's just a list of do's and don'ts. God's just a rule giver, yada, yada, yada. Again, couldn't be further from the truth. James and people like Paul were really, if anything, trying to create a roadmap or treasure map, depending on your preference, map nonetheless. They're trying to make a map to success, showing what places aren't safe to travel and what path is the best. So think about those old maps, if you ever looked at them, like I don't know, in the times of Columbus or the whatever, when they thought the world fell off. On those maps, they'd be like, hey, don't travel here. There'll be sea monsters here. There'll be trouble here. All to say, avoid those areas. And that's really more or less what the New Testament writers are trying to do, is create a roadmap to success. Is a stay on this path from A to get to B. Well, B is, when we join Christ again. But, avoid this area. You'll be safe. If you head down this area, you might find trouble. That's really what their goal was. So to kind of highlight that and to kind of get more into today's lesson, we're going to look at James chapter 2, verses 14 through 19. The section is entitled Faith and Deeds. Verse 14 says, "What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such a faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes or daily food. And if one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm and well fed,' but does nothing for their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if not accompanied by action, is dead. But someone will say, 'You have faith, I have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by my deeds. If you believe that there is one God, good, even the demons believe that and shudder.'" So let's kind of break this down a little bit. Verse 14, the big question that is being asked here is, can you claim to be a follower of Jesus if life looks exactly the same as you did, your life looks the same as it did before you met Jesus? Now, you'll recognize this question because it comes up in Paul's writings. We mentioned that a lot in Acts and in Romans. James is bringing it up. Again, they're kind of bringing this same question up to all of their audiences. Paul to the Gentiles, James to Christ-following Jews, and so on. This is a common question because I think it's one that we must constantly face, or at least ask ourselves, take a gut check and say, is this where I'm supposed to be? Am I doing the things I'm supposed to do? Do I look different enough from the world? And so it's a question that comes up often because it needs to come up often. But again, these are people bringing up the same question to their particular audiences and to us today. So the question will continue to come up in different ways, in different forms, as a constant reminder that we need to stand out as a Christ follower. So ultimately, James is saying, if your life isn't different, is your faith real? Again, James says no. Pretty straightforward. And again, if you read through James, you'll see that he does not hold back. He is pretty blunt about, especially when it comes to things that are true. He likes to spell it out. And actually, that's one of the things I appreciate about James, is that he doesn't do anything but tell you what's what. So anyway, that kind of leads us to verses 15 and 16. To back up his claim and his truth that we need to look different and act different and have deeds with our faith, he gives this example. What if you know someone who's hungry and cold and you say to them, "Here, eat something," or "Take my sweater," and you never actually give them food or your sweater? What does that make you? A liar, a jerk, a hypocrite, I don't know. Any number of things, right? What does that make us? If we're being honest with ourselves, we know we're not living out what we should. We might have sympathy or empathy, but if we're not doing anything about it, then it means nothing. They're empty words. They mean nothing. You have said the right thing, but you have not been helpful in any way, shape, or form. So again, it's all emptiness. And I guess that's kind of the point, is that we're shallow in our faith then. I will say this, though, and I think this is an important thing to bring up. There is a flip side to all of this, and I think it doesn't always get the same attention that deeds without faith get. What if you are someone or a person who does actually do something to help people, feed them, clothe them? Aren't these deeds good enough for faith? Kind of is the flip side question. Sadly, or truthfully, the answer is no. As faith without deeds is dead, again, according to James, and all the New Testament writers, deeds without faith is also dead, because it's not tied to anything. It's not tied to the glorification of God. It's not tethered to anything real or true. Now, having said that, it is true, at least in that scenario, someone who's actually doing deeds but has no faith, the needy do benefit. There may be some help socially that they're offering, but in terms of like the Christian faith, it doesn't simply bring us a person to the point of earning more faith or faith in general. Now, in other words, deeds don't buy our way into faith. So a person is doing something good for someone else. I can't stress this enough, and I don't want to diminish it. That should be recognized. Credit where credit is due. We should follow that example. We should be inspired by that example as Christ followers, or shamed by it. We should be shamed enough into motivation. We should follow that example. Again, credit where credit is due. I would never diminish that. If people are actually doing and making a difference in the lives of others, that's great. However, that doesn't automatically, those deeds in and of themselves do not automatically give that person faith. Why? Because remember, only one thing brings us to true faith, salvation, and that is Christ. So to kind of bring it back full circle then, if we see someone without true faith, but yet they have deeds, that should again inspire us as people of faith. But that brings us to verse 17. You can't just say you are a follower of Jesus and not do anything about it. You can't just sing the songs and of praise and worship and get all the feels and read some Bible every now and then and think that that makes you a follower of Jesus. That's part of the recipe. If we have deeds and all that, then even better. But if we're missing that main component, again, these are main components. Praise and worship is a good component. Being in the Word, absolutely a component. Being in prayer, a huge component of our faith. And ... deeds. So our faith should make a difference in how we treat people. It should make a difference in how we approach our work, our school, our job. It needs to make a difference. Otherwise, it isn't real. Excuse me. And that's James's overall point. That's a lot of the New Testament writers. And if our faith doesn't show up in our actions, James is asking, once again, if we're actually following Jesus. Boom, there's that question again. James brings it right back around, and he's going to keep asking us pointedly, are we making our faith real by acting on it? Which kind of brings us to verses 18 to 19. This is kind of paraphrasing James, but he says, in essence, hey, you know what? Some people might be thinking it is possible to have faith in Jesus, but it doesn't need to show up in my actions. James answers that thought that he says that's impossible. Because what you're really showing is that you have this great head knowledge, you have all these truths in your head, and in that sense, that doesn't really separate us from anything, especially the demons. He says, even the demons have that knowledge. They know Jesus exists. They know he is all-powerful, that he's part of the Trinity, that he's God, he has all the power. But it doesn't change intrinsically who they are. It is just head knowledge. So when I said earlier, James is very blunt about things of faith and things of truth, and especially living the Christian life, he's saying, hey, if all you have is up here, you're nothing other than, just your existence, who you were created to be. Nothing really separates you differently than that much of the demonic forces, right? The demons, who have the same amount of head knowledge, and maybe even more, and yet it still doesn't change them. We should feel changed by our faith, is ultimately what James is trying to beat over our head. So hey, don't be like the demons. Act on your faith. Our kind of closing thought with all this is really said by Jesus, who sums it up entirely in Matthew 22 through 37. He says, love God and love others, right? Love God, love others. He tells us that's a good place to start when it comes to living out what it means to follow Jesus. Let that be a start. The golden rule, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And of course, he says before that is to love your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. But all that to say is that that's the beginning. Start from there and see if that doesn't begin to change your approach, your outlook, and your actions with those around you. So with that, I hope you have a wonderful and blessed day, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.